name is Bill Rothwell, and today I would like to talk to you about my book, Mastering the Instructional Systems Design Process. And that particular book talks about how we can use a competency-based approach to build the skills of instructional design. Now, of course, it begs the question, what is instructional design? And literally, when we hear the term instructional design, we hear that we've combined the term instructional and the term design. So we apply the principles of design, which is multidisciplinary. It crosses the borders of many disciplines on how we set up something and implement it and evaluate it. We combine the design principles with instruction. So basically, the book is competency-based, and it's based on a model of what an instructional designer should do in an organizational setting. So, and of course, many of my listeners may be familiar with the so-called ADDIE model. ADDIE is an acronym, ADDIE, which stands for analyze, design, develop, implement, or some people say instruct, and evaluate. But the book is more comprehensive than that. The model in the book is more comprehensive than ADDIE. Of course, it incorporates those elements. Analyze means look at what the learner needs to do. Design means set up the experience. Develop means find, make, or buy and modify instructional materials to meet the needs of the learners. Implement or instruct means teach people, deliver the instruction, and finally, evaluate means determine whether we met the training needs of individuals and thereby addressed the issues that affect their job performance. But the book covers more than that. It's bigger than that. Before the analyze step, we have to do an assessment to determine if a problem can be solved by training. We call that performance analysis. And in that step, we have to determine whether the problem can best be solved by training or instruction or by some other approach. We know from research that about 90% of organizational problems have to be solved using action taken by management rather than training geared to an individual. Only 10% of organizational problems can be solved through training alone. And so what do? We've got to sift out and make sure that before we start to use the ADDIE approach, we have determined that it's a problem that's suitable for a training solution. A lot of times managers don't know what to do when they encounter a problem with worker performance or worker behavioral problems. Behavioral problems would be things like showing up to work late. So since managers are not trained on this, either by their organizations in most cases, or even if they have a professional degree like an MBA, they will not be trained on how to do performance analysis and thereby determine whether a problem can be solved by training or using some other method. So the first step of mastering the instructional systems design process is to do performance analysis and determine whether it's a problem that can be solved by training. If it is, then we move forward with instructional design. If it is not, Then we have to consider the management actions that might need to be taken in order to help address the root cause of the problem. What would be examples of management action? Well, let's change the recruiting methods. Let's change the selection methods. Let's change the performance review methods. Let's change the incentive system or the reward system in the organization. There are literally thousands of things we can do in management to address root causes of performance problems or behavioral problems. But once we've determined that it is a problem suitable to be solved by training, then we move to the next step, which is needs assessment. And we have to consider several things during the needs assessment phase. One of those is the instructional needs. Exactly what do we want learners to be able to do upon completion of the learning experience? We also have to analyze the kind of learners that we expect to have. It makes a big difference if we're going to have newbies to the business or we're going to have PhDs in engineering sitting in the class with 20 years of work experience. Makes a big difference the kind of people who are participating in the learning experience. Then we also have to look at the organizational setting in which individuals will apply the training that we give them. So, what are the assumptions we make about the workplace in which they will need to demonstrate the skills we teach them? So, we have to do in needs assessment a content or work analysis, a learner analysis, and a workplace analysis. Beyond that, once we've done that, we can start to develop instructional objectives. Instructional objectives, when they are met, the needs are met, and thereby the training problem is solved. So first, we identify the measurable results. Upon completion of the training, participants should be able to do what? And we spell that out. We identify the behaviors, the conditions, and some kind of measure of evaluation so that we can judge whether they met the goal or not, the learning goal or not. Then, beyond the instructional objective phase, we typically develop test items. Now, be careful, tests are more than written exams. Professors think of written exams, but trainers think of performance tests. If we're training people to do job interviewing, then we test them by seeing if they can role play an effective job interview using the principles we taught them. Those would be test items. We would have to develop metrics based on the instructional objectives to test whether those objectives were met. Once we've got the instructional objectives and the test items developed, then we can look for the media and the materials to meet the training needs and thereby solve the performance problems. So we use the make, buy, or buy and modify approach. Where can we get instructional materials? Maybe we already have some of what's needed. Maybe we have to go out on the open market and purchase something. Maybe we have to build some of it and buy some of it. All of that is that next step, part of the design and develop steps. Then, when we're finished with that, we need to implement. But before we reach implementation, we have to consider the media, the means by which we are going to deliver instruction. Is it going to be online? Is it going to be on site? Is it going to be a hybrid? Are we going to have video? Are we going to have print? There are many different media by which we can deliver instruction. So we have to make some decisions about what's the best media by which to deliver the instruction. Once we've got the media, then we can identify the materials. A next step might be to do a formative evaluation. What that means is we pilot test the instructional materials that we made or bought and modified in order to see whether they work. And we use a small group of targeted learners and we try out the learning material. That's called a formative evaluation. We modify it, and then we're prepared to roll out the training experience. And after we've rolled it out, we can evaluate it summatively. Summative evaluation means we evaluate whether we met the instructional objectives, thereby address the learning needs and solve the performance issues. So that is the process of instructional design. But we can go beyond that, and the book does not cover the next stage of development, which we call a learning experience design. And why would we need something different? Isn't instruction enough? Of course it is. And it's hard work doing good training. In fact, training is the most expensive solution to performance problems. That's why we look for management issues and actions that can be taken that might get quicker, faster, cheaper results and productivity improvement than training would. But remember, there's more than one way people can learn. And instruction is only one way. Instruction generally implies something formal. And I just described a formal process of coming up with planned, on-site, online, or hybrid learning experiences. But today, many companies live by the 70-20-10 rule. If you're not familiar with that statistic, 70-20-10, that phrase, do a browser search on that particular term, and you will find many YouTube videos, many Google sites that talk about that statistic. 70% of learning should be done on the job and integrated with the worker's job. 20% should be social learning and social use interaction with peers to learn new ways to do things, and only 10% of learning should be of the variety that I described earlier of planned online, on-site, or hybrid learning. So when we talk about learning experience design, we're talking about all the ways by which we could help learners use learning broadly defined, not limited to planned instruction, like a rotation program, like a mentoring program, like sending somebody off to a conference. Those are examples of learning experiences, but they are not instruction in a planned way. So learning experience design is bigger than instructional design, and many organizations today are very interested in that. But check out my book, Mastering the Instructional Design Process, to see what's required to build rigorous training that gets results. Thank you for listening.